Yo, parish orphans and retrogrades. Recently, the former president, Donald J. Trump, was asked whether in the 2024 race he was leaning toward a female running mate, given that now 2 of the 3 most probable female Veep choices are said to be female. And President Trump said the following: I like the concept of female vice president, but we're going to pick the best. But I do like the concept, yes. He said, I like the concept of female vice president. This casts us back 8 years in time, 8 years to the 2016 campaign, when President Trump said the following. Actually, he said it all throughout the campaign trail, and then he said it the first year in the White House when he was getting ready to give us Amy Coney Barrett. This is what he said.
It will be a woman, a very talented, very brilliant woman.
And he went on to extol the traits of brilliant, talented women who he had set aside. He was using identitarian politics, the worst sort, even worse than ethnic identitarian politics, or sexual identitarian politics, because whereas you'd think black, white, yellow, pink, orange, brown, the races are all capable, assuming that they're male, of doing the same things in theory, which with different demographical assumptions about the likeliness of said things being actually in the competence of the person. But as conservatives, that is to say, as Christians, I'm not even just talking as Catholics, as Christians, we reject the very possibility of the competence of, say, a woman to do the job of politics or, let's just say Parliament, Congress, President, Supreme Court Justice. And there are several moral reasons why we reject this. One, we reject it because it's not in the specific difference of a woman to do such things. Secondly, because of the opportunity cost left in the home place. And thirdly, because then the policy agenda will suffer. Conservatives always choose, today's show we're going to talk about this, to only discuss the third. Well, I don't like Nikki Haley, probably for the first 2 reasons, which we'll mostly talk about as one. But I'm just going to talk about the bad policy agenda that most women have, but I don't want to emphasize the fact that most women will have it. I read this LifeSite News article that was up yesterday. Will Trump ask Nikki Haley to be his running mate? Not if America First conservatives get their way. It goes like this. Talk of Nikki Haley becoming Donald Trump's vice presidential running mate ended as quickly as it began. In December, social media was abuzz over news that Trump was asking those closest to him what they thought about Haley, his one-time ambassador to the UN. Remember, Trump gave us Nikki Haley, and Trump gave Nikki Haley her career, more or less. He took the longest leap in it for her. Thank you, Trump. Not. That possibility, LifeSite continues, didn't last more than a few days, nor was it all that serious. Politico reports that all kinds of Trump allies, MAGA media influencers, and even his son are sending the Republican frontrunner the message, no, stop. Like Buckley saying conservatives must stand athwart history and yell, halt. Among those who have made their opposition to the 2-term South Carolina governor, include Steve Bannon, Roger Stone, and Donald Trump Jr. Now, Representative Matt Gaetz has similarly told Newsweek that Nikki Haley, according to this LifeSite article, I'm most closely aligned of all the online weblogs with LifeSite, that Nikki Haley as VP would be an establishment neocon fantasy and a MAGA nightmare. Another voice speaking out against Haley is former Fox News host Tucker Carlson. As reported by Politico, Carlson previously told podcaster Tim Pool that he would, quote, advocate against a Trump-Haley ticket as strongly as I could, and that he has. He went on to do it in typical Tucker way, comic, personable, strong. And I'm not going to read you all the Carlson quotes. Carlson notes that the Democratic Party is stuck with two fatally unpopular candidates. And therefore, their only option at this point is to run a Republican who has the same views as Biden and Kamala Harris. So we're talking about policy agenda. Remember what I said at the top. Policy agenda is the reason you shouldn't vote for female candidates. Carlson then noted that Reid Hoffman, who Vox has called one of the biggest fundraisers in the Democrat Party, is helping Haley's campaign. Last year, Hoffman donated blah, 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 blah to the super PAC. He gave $1 million to blah, 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 pro-abortion, and Haley's supported by him, blah, blah, blah. Carlson also pointed out that Hoffman was friends with Epstein and blah, blah, blah. Carlson further theorized that the only way Haley could become the GOP nominee is if Republican voters have no one else to vote for. So they go through and they recount for you why Nikki Haley's policy positions are bad. It boils down to, and this is intoned most explicitly by Tucker Carlson, her support for lax immigration laws. That's bad. Climate ideology is bad, as well as their calls to end anonymity on social media and tireless backing of Ukraine. These all make her an enemy of America First conservatism. You know what's lacking from this list? Those are all policy agendas that any male politician might have, and you'd say, yeah, that's bad. We had to do X minutes of research, or maybe X hours of research to gather these things. Most people remember a lot of them. And you'd say, if this was a male candidate, well, that's bad. I spent, 45 minutes or an hour 45 researching this to write this article for LifeSite News, which is an excellent outfit, and I like it. And I quote from it often. But I'm wondering why spend the 45 minutes or the hour 45 minutes or the 3 hours or whatever time externality it was to make a weaker argument against her candidacy and the candidacy, at least as Veep, of all of those like it. Why do we have President Trump, a supposed conservative, saying things like,
It will be a woman, a very talented, very brilliant woman.
I remember months before this on the campaign trail in, I think, New Hampshire, where he said, who wants to see a woman? And they had the Marxist cries for women coming from the throats of Republicans. So Nikki Haley shouldn't be vice president because of her views on all of these issues that a vice president has no control over. Immigration, COVID, climate, and other things. Her calls to end anonymity on social media. I don't really care about that. It was a stupid way she intoned it, but that's more, again, because of who she is than what it stands for. You could make the same claim and make it semi-defensible, but it's the womanishness behind all these policy agendas that make them bad, not the other way around. I mean, I'm not saying that I would back Ukraine or I would support a male politician who supports Ukraine, or that the same pace climate ideology, same pace lax immigration laws. No, these things are bad because they're bad, but they're not the most bad. What about the argument, parish orphans and retrogrades? This is what today's show is going to be about. That it's immoral to vote for Nikki Haley or any of the other front-running Veep candidates, running mate candidates for Trump, because they're female. Isn't that what we all have in mind? Even moderate conservatives have that in mind, because we've never had a female president. Okay, now we have had a female vice president. We currently have one. But Republicans have never won with one. Now, John McCain ran with Sarah Palin, and it's been experimented with ever since by Republicans. Demographical nightmare. But what about the argument that it's immoral to vote for a woman and only a communist party who hates the family would run one, would run a woman? Do you think it's wrong to make the strongest claim against a bad suggestion? Because the strongest claim against the bad suggestion of Nikki Haley or Kristi Noem, they're both from the Carolinas and the Dakotas. South Dakota, South Carolina. The best, strongest, most moral, and most effective claim is don't vote for them because they're women. You know who makes this claim? All of the popes of the 20th century. Women in parliament are outside their proper sphere, and their position there would be the desperation and ruin of society. What about that argument? I know people are going to say that I'm like a clanging cymbal, a banging bass drum that just doesn't stop on this issue. But I want to make a slightly more nuanced argument than I made in applying the case for patriarchy and ask your husband to the political process and the way it works in absurd post-fall America. That's what we're going to do today. What about the argument of one of our very favorite popes, probably our favorite in the 20th century, Pius X, that it's immoral to vote for a woman because she's a woman. Woman in parliament, that the equivalent is Congress, so we've already made this fatal error, are outside their proper sphere, and their position there would be the desperation and ruin of society. Catholics just don't take Catholicism seriously, and I'm not talking about Pope Francis. I've done a bunch of shows on Pope Francis of late. I'm talking about trad Catholics, conservative Catholics. Do any conservatives, or Protestant or Orthodox included, believe this? Yeah, you see some of it on Twitter, but today's show, we're going to get to a couple call-outs, and then we're going to get to the main content. There are those of us who believe it, so why is it blocked out from the mainstream? And even something as off the mainstream, off Broadway, is LifeSite News as the number one reason to not vote for it. Well, LifeSite News is always supporting traditional 20th century popes, Leo the 13th, Pius the 10th. You'll jump back 20 more years, you'll get Pius the 9th being quoted. The Society of Pius the 10th has received an uncommonly high portion of support from LifeSite News. You're not going to find someone more neutral on the SSPX issue than me, and I've said this for 5 years. People confuse my view with that of my brother's, and it's stupid. You have to look to the first part of the name. That's called a first name, people. I'm totally neutral on SSPX, but LifeSite News and 1 Peter 5 and Crisis Magazine have run a bunch, article after article supporting the Society of Pope Pius X. I don't think this is the end of the world. I don't think it's wise. I don't think it's the end of the world. I understand it. And I don't really have a position one way or the other. But the point is, our big hero as conservative Catholics is supposedly Pius X. And he is absolutely clear that the reason you shouldn't vote for Nikki Haley applies to Kristi Noem, applies to Marjorie Taylor Greene, applies to whoever. And she was popular 2 years ago. She's fallen out of favor. Not all. Most of these women cheat because fundamentally what they're doing is gender dysphoric, creating all kinds of testosterone. Look up any of the women I've talked about. I'm not sure who's done what. The odds are you're going to find a cheater. She's already abandoned the home. Why not just make the trifecta complete? You abandon the home, you go into the public sphere, just do the third part. Cheat, and most of them do. Pope Pius X, who I thought is our North Star, or our pole star. Same difference. I thought he's our big hero. He said women in parliament are outside the proper sphere, and their position there would be the desperation and ruin of society. Now, I get it why Fox News, who isn't a conservative outlet, they're run by the same people that CNN and MSNBC are. They literally are. But what about like LifeSite News, my favorite weblog to go to? They won't make this argument. Fox News will say, well, we have to get Trump through the most popular means possible. LifeSite News would say that to me if I said, hey, why did you run this whole article saying don't vote for Joseph Stalin because he uses the wrong kind of wash cycle on his blankets? It's like, how about don't vote for Stalin for the most pressing and most compelling moral reasons? It will be a communist genocide, collectivist command economy that destroys us all. That's you hit people with your best stuff first. Why LifeSite News?